Oh, this is a very important lecture by Mr. Azeem Ali, our esteemed friend from Cambridge, having lectured so many lectures on different aspects of world heritage and Indian heritage, Banaras Hindu University on online mode. And today his lecture is very challenging, and it has always gripped the mind of the people, contemporary people, to envision, to imagine about India and how at different points of time in history India was imagined and how different names were given to India. Sometimes when we go to Qutub Minar, then there we find some Mehrauli lost some. There someone writes about India as something which coming from the Sindh to Hind. And like that, there are different inscriptions. They tell about the different names given to India by different contemporary actors. So today, Dr. Azeem Ali would be sharing with us his views about the idea of India or the Indian names or the name of India at different points of time in Indian history. So with these words, I welcome all the dignitaries who joined the lecture, and at the same time I invite Mr. Azeem Ali to deliver his lecture. Please.
Thank you, Professor Pandey. So the title of my talk today is The Names of India Throughout History. So I'm going to start now by just saying how India's been known by a variety of names and throughout history, and it's changed for millennia. And my starting point for this lecture is going to be the Indian Constitution, and which formally came into force on 26th of January 1950, and it attempted to solve this issue, that the fact that India has been known by so many names. And Article 1 of the Constitution states, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. And this was decided after much deliberation and debate at the Constituent Assembly of India in the run-up to the enactment of the Constitution between 1946 and 1950. Initially, the first draft of Article 1 simply read, India shall be a union of states. But for some Assembly members, use of India evoked a sense of continuity and familiarity, especially with foreign countries. B.R. Ambedkar said, India has been known as India throughout history and throughout all these past years. He opposed India being referred to as the Union of India. However, considered Assembly member Seth Govindas said that Bharat was not looking backwards. He went on to say, I want to look forward and also want that there should be scientific inventions in this country. By naming our country as Bharat, we are not doing anything which will prevent us from marching forward. We should indeed give such a name to our country as may be befitting our history and our culture. Das was supported by fellow constituency assembly member Shiban Lal Saxena, who also said that in addition to Bharat being the name of the Union, Hindi should be the national language of Bharat. It's important to note that some constituent assembly members even wanted states in Article 1 to be replaced by Pradesh. However, Jawaharlal Nehru objected. He said that Pradesh is a word which has no definition. No one knows what it means. It's a very good word and gradually may begin to get a significance. And then, of course, it can be used either in the Constitution or otherwise. At the present moment, the normal use of the word varies in hundreds of different ways. And this word state is infinitely more precise, more definite, not only for the outside world, but even for us. And this debate was finally resolved by adding Bharat to Article 1 of the Constitution. And now I'm going to look at the variety of names India has been known by throughout the centuries, if not millennia. So we're going to look at Aryavata, Bharat, Hindush, Hodu, Jambudvipa, and Tianzu. Now I'm going to start with Aryavata, which is the land, was the phrase given to all the Vedic tribes that occupied that kind of were in India thousands of years ago. And this is perhaps the oldest of the terms to actually refer to India, particularly in this context, North India, and it appears in the Vedas. And Aryavata means abode or kind of land of the Aryans. And it initially comprised the Ganga Yamuna Delta and then expanded from the Saraswati River to Kalkavan, as well as north of the Vindhyas and south of the Himalayas. This matched the initial territory of the Vedic tribes who were living there at the time. And these tribes would eventually form kingdoms, the first of which was that of Kuru. And the Bharatas, which would later give their name to Bharat, was another of these tribes. Thus, Bharat was derived from the Bharatas. And by the time the Manusmriti was compiled about 2,000 years ago, Aryavata comprised India divided into two by the Vindhyas, with trade routes known as the Uttarapata and the Dakshinapata covering the region. And a related term, interestingly, to Aryavata is Arya-Vajanem, which is a term found in the Zoroastrian religion of Iran. And this was known in the Avestan language used by the Zoroastrians in their religious ceremonies. It's known as Aryanam Veja. And this is how they also conceived the homeland at the same time. And similarly, it was also considered the homeland of the Iranian people, the Persians, and was believed to be where Zoroastrianism developed as a faith. And just like in Hinduism, interestingly, very interesting parallels, at the center of this land was a mountain. So for the Zoroastrians, the mountain in the center was called Hara, and in Sanskrit, as everybody in this talk knows, it is known as Mount Meru. And just like the Ganga, the ancient Persians even venerated a sacred river, and in their case, it was known as the Ditya. So it's kind of almost like exactly a parallel, if not a commonality, actually, between both Zoroastrianism and Hinduism, or Vedic Hinduism, I should say. And at the Datya river, for Zoroastrians, there were offerings made to Anahita. And this term of Arya-Vajanem, or Arya-Veja, eventually evolved into Iransha, land of the Aryans, by the time of the Sasanian Empire, which was the last of the three great pre-Islamic empires of Iran. And this eventually evolved further throughout the Islamic period into what we now know as Iran. And this became official in 1935 when the Pahlavi king, Reza Shah Pahlavi, the penultimate Shah of Iran, formally proclaimed Iran as the official name in 1935. And this is the conception of kind of India. So now we're looking at India in the kind of wider world. So because we're going to start looking at Hindush, which would eventually evolve into the word that we now know as India. And you can see it was just restricted mainly to Punjab, but obviously it comprised the entire country. And this is the Persian Empire's peak, stretching from the Indus right up to the Aegean and down the Nile Valley, touching what is now Sudan, and up to Central Asia in the north and Libya in the west. And this is kind of India at the same time looking kind of westward, so from the perspective of the Indians, how India would look like. So this kind of looks from looking eastward from the Persian perspective, and then from the Indians looking west, seeing this huge empire to the west, which had territory in 3 continents, in Europe, Africa, and Asia. And these are the kingdoms that comprised India at the time. Many of these are familiar, and I'll touch upon these when I was talking about coinage, as all of these kingdoms minted coinage. And Kuru was perhaps the oldest of them. So Hindush, I'm now going to talk about Hindush and Hodu, because they are 2 related terms for India. So Hindush became the most influential name of India, as it would eventually evolve into numerous forms, namely Indica in ancient Greek, and from this India in Latin would develop, which is still used today across the world. It also developed into Hodu in the biblical Hebrew, and is recorded in the book of Esther in the Old Testament of the Bible. And in the Bible, it actually states in the book of Esther, it says, "And it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, who reigned from Hodu, India, to Kush, which is now Sudan in Africa, over 127 provinces." And Hindush is first recorded in an inscription which was made after the Achaemenid conquest of the Indus Valley during the reign of Darius I in 500 BC. And it was known as the wealthiest satrap or province of the Achaemenid Empire, and contributed gold dust, as recorded by the Greek historian Herodotus. And here, interestingly, is an ancient Egyptian inscription, and showing India, or Hindush as written, and this is how it was written in hieroglyphics. This is part of a dedication to the Persian Emperor Darius I. And this is a a contemporary from the time. This is a depiction from the time Darius I, and this is showing an Indian soldier who is serving in his army. So this is how they perceived Indian people at the time. And this kind of depiction is from Iran in Fars province, not far from the ancient Persian capital of Persepolis, or Takht Jamshid as known in Persian. And Herodotus wrote about the Indians. The Indians, who are more numerous than any other nation known to us, formed the satrapy Indike, or India, and paid more tribute than any other subject nation, namely 360 talents of gold dust. It's also known that when Xerxes I invaded Greece during the famous wars of Athens and Sparta, Indian chiefs participated, as described by Herodotus. The Indians wore garments of tree wool and carried bows of reed and iron-tipped arrows of the same. Such was their equipment, they were appointed to march under the command of Pharnazathras, son of Artabates. And at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC, when the Greeks decisively defeated the Persians, Indians appear again in Herodotus' writings. After the Bactrians, he set the Indians. Next to the Indians, he posted the Saka, who were an Iranian tribe living in Central Asia, who were subject to the Persians. And after the Battle of Plataea, the Persians would never directly invade Greece again, but would finance Sparta in its war against Athens during the Peloponnesian War. Sparta would win in 404 BC, and 50 years later, the kingdom of Macedon would rise to power, particularly under Philip II, and this would become the dominant power in Greece. And it was his son, who's obviously known to history as Alexander IV of Macedon, or better known as Alexander the Great, who would invade India, ultimately after conquering the Persian Empire. And obviously, everybody here knows how he marched all the way from northern Greece, all the way down to Egypt, subjugated the Middle East, and then Iraq, and Iran, Afghanistan, Central Asia, and then down into India. And I've covered this in part during my previous talks. So it's well-covered ground for me, and we've covered this before. And Philip II's son, Alexander the Great, would succeed his empire in 336 BC and launched his war of conquest against the Achaemenid Empire. And his first major clash with the Persians came in 334 BC at the Battle of Granicus in present-day northwest Turkey. And he triumphed over the Persians and conquered territory in Anatolia, which is now the Asian part of Turkey, which comprised most of the territory of the present country of Turkey. And victory would follow again in 333 BC at Issus, which was in southern Turkey, and he would conquer Achaemenid land along the Mediterranean, including in Egypt. And as he marched back towards Persian control of Mesopotamia, or Iraq, the Achaemenid king Darius III had assembled an army in Mesopotamia. And the Persian and Greeks clashed in 331 BC at Gaugamela, which is present-day Erbil in northern Iraq, in the Kurdish-controlled region of northern Iraq, where there's autonomous government today. And it was here, at this battle, that Indians were mentioned again, and they comprised part of the Persian army, as described by the Greek historian Arrian, who wrote much later during the Roman period. For the Indians who were adjacent to the Bactrians, all being under the command of Bessus, the viceroy of the land of Bactria, Basaintis, the viceroy of Arakotia, led the Arakotians and the men who were called the Mountaineer Indians. Alexander the Great crushed Darius III's army and proceeded into Iran, where he defeated the Persians again at the Persian Gate in 330 BC, after which he proceeded to sack the Achaemenid capital of Persepolis, known as Takht Jamshid, or Throne of Jamshid, in present-day Fars province in Iran. He went on to subjugate the rest of Iran before crossing into present-day Afghanistan, which was then part of Greater Iran, and marched north into present-day Central Asia, where he fought nomadic tribes who resisted his rule. After subjugating much of present-day Iran, Afghanistan, and Uzbekistan, Alexander the Great turned east towards India. And it's from India that, again, both cultures came directly into contact, the Greeks and the Indians. And this is a map showing where he marched, crossing the Khyber Pass into Punjab, and then along the Indus down to Sindh, and then back across Balochistan. And this is perhaps one of the most detailed descriptions I'm going to be giving to this talk. So Arrian actually gave a detailed description of India in his book on Alexander the Great's reign, which was based largely on the Greek traveller Megasthenes. So this is how he described India. Indus is the largest of all rivers in Asia and Europe, except the Ganges, which is also an Indian river. It takes its rise on this side of Mount Parapamisus, or the Caucasus, the Himalayas, and discharges its water into the Great Sea, which is the Arabian Sea today, in the Sindh Delta, which lies near India in the direction of the south wind. This river Indus Alexander crossed with daybreak with his army into the country of Indians, concerning whom, in this history, I have described neither what laws they enjoy, nor what strange animals their land produce, nor how many and what sort of fish and water monsters are produced by the Indus, Hydaspes, Ganges, or other rivers of India. They prove that the Indians whom Alexander visited with his army, and he visited many tribes with them, were destitute of gold, and also though by no means luxurious in their mode of living. Moreover, they discovered that they were tall in stature, in fact as tall as any men throughout Asia, most of them being 5 cubits in height, or a little less, and in war they were by far the bravest of all races inhabiting Asia at the time. And in 326 BC, Alexander the Great crossed the Khyber Pass into India and conquered Ernos in the present-day Swat Valley. He then marched deep into Punjab. His first major battle came at the Hydaspes, or Jhelum River, in Punjab. He defeated King Porus, or Rajapuru, as he's famously known, to perhaps some of the audience, who ruled over the Pauravas kingdom. And Rajapuru submitted to him, and it's kind of famous, well-known story to many Indians. And after this victory, Alexander the Great proceeded deep into Punjab and conquered the city of Sagala, or Sialkot in Punjab. And then he reached the Beas River, or the Hyphasis River, as it was known. And Aryan actually described the land beyond the Beas River. It was reported that the country beyond the river Hyphasis was fertile, and that the men were good agriculturists and gallant in war, and that they conducted their own political affairs in a regular and constitutional manner. For the multitude was ruled by the aristocracy, who governed in no respect contrary to the rules of moderation. It was also stated that the men of that district possessed a greater number of elephants than any other Indians, and that those men were of very great stature and excelled in valor. And it was these reports that really caused a lot of panic among Alexander the Great's Greek soldiers, who were, by the time they reached the Beas River, were war-weary and homesick. And Alexander the Great tried to urge his troops to no avail, according to Aryan, but his troops had to turn back. And Alexander the Great accepted the wishes of his soldiers and decided to return back to India and turn south along the Hydrotis, or Ravi River, to subdue southern Punjab in his campaign against the Mali, or the Malavas, as known in Sanskrit, in present-day Multan in Punjab. He defeated the Malians, or the people of the Malavas, the Malava tribe, but was wounded in his campaign. By 325 BC, he had reached the mouth of the Indus River in Sindh. His admiral Nearchos proceeded to sail across the Arabian Sea back to Mesopotamia, while Alexander the Great took a land route back by Gudrosia and Makran, which is now present-day Balochistan. Alexander the Great then marched back into Persia via Kermania, or Kerman province in Iran, and Persepolis, where he repaired the tomb of Cyrus the Great, which had been damaged in the earlier sack of the city in 330 BC. He then marched back to Susa, or present-day Shush, in Khuzestan, Iran, and then back into Mesopotamia, where he died in Babylon, possibly due to poisoning. And Alexander the Great's empire after death would be divided among his generals. Seleucus Nicator would inherit his territories in Iran, Central Asia, and India. Seleucus marched east to reassert his rule over these regions. It was in India where he clashed with the new Mauryan kingdom under Chandragupta Maurya, who defeated him. There was a peace treaty where Chandragupta gave 500 elephants to Seleucus, which were then used to great effect against his Ptolemy rivals in the Middle East. In return, Seleucus married off his daughter to Chandragupta. Seleucus also sent the Greek ambassador Megasthenes to India, and he recorded his observation in his long-lost book known as the Indika. Megasthenes passed through Punjab and then to Patliputra, or Patna, via the Yamuna and Ganga rivers. The Indica was later cited by the Greek-Roman historians Arrian, Strabo, Pliny, and Diodorus Siculus. Megasthenes, interestingly, even tried to kind of point out similarities between ancient Greeks and Indians by citing the legend of the Greek god Dionysus. The most learned scholars say that Dionysus invaded India and conquered it. Dionysus taught Indians several things, including how to grow plants, make wine, and worship. He founded several large cities. He introduced laws and established courts. For this reason, he was regarded as a deity by the Indians. He ruled India 52 years before dying of old age. His descendants ruled India for several generations before being dethroned and replaced by democratic city-states. And Megasthenes even argued that the Greek god, a demigod, Heracles, and Hercules, or better known as Hercules to many of the audience, even he was said to have visited India. And he wrote, "The Indians inhabited the hill country also claimed that Heracles was one of them. Like the Greeks, they characterized him with the club and lion skin. According to them, Heracles was a powerful man who subjugated evil beasts. He had several sons and one daughter who became rulers in different parts of his dominion. He founded several cities, the greatest of which was Palibotra, or better known as Patliputra. Heracles built several places in the city, fortified it with water-filled trenches, and settled a number of people in the city. His descendants ruled India for several generations, but never launched an expedition beyond India." And it was after the conquest of Chandragupta Maurya, which saw Greek rule end for a time in the Indus Valley, that the Greek communities found themselves under the rule of the Mauryans. And under under Chandragupta's son Ashoka, under the latest successor Ashoka, we now see that another term being used for India, which was Jambudvipa. And Jambudvipa traces its origins to the Puranic conception of the world being divided into 7 continents. Jambudvipa formed the innermost continent and possibly took its name from the Jambu tree. The middlemost continent was elevated, and at its center lay Mount Meru and the city of Brahmapuri, which was surrounded by 8 cities. And here's an inscription from the time of Ashoka in Prakrit Brahmi, which talks about Jambudipasi, or Jambudvipa, to refer to Ashoka's empire, which comprised the majority of India. And this inscription was found in Sasaram in Bihar. And this is the Mauryan Empire under the rule of Ashoka, so most of India, and stretched even further into Afghanistan. And this is what Ashoka meant by Jambudvipa, so basically the majority of the country. And Greek rule wouldn't return to India until the collapse of the Mauryans and the rise of the Shunga dynasty in the Magadha in present-day Bihar. In 186 BC, the Greco-Bactrians under King Demetrius and Niketos, the latter meaning unconquered, took advantage of this and invaded India. And you can see here's a coin of Demetrius and Niketos, and you can see the elephant here representing his conquest in India, and Hercules, who I just described with a club. And this says Demetrios Vasilios. And decades and after this period, after the initial conquest, between 180 and 175 BC, a civil war broke out, with Abalatotas breaking away from the Greco-Bactrians to form the Indo-Greek kingdom centered in Punjab. He was soon followed by a succession of kings until Menander I came to power and established his capital in Sialkot, in Punjab. Menander I, known as Sota, the Saviour, conquered land up to Mathura in Uttar Pradesh. However, King Kharavela of Kalinga checked the advances of the Indo-Greeks. And Strabo gave an account of these conquests. The Greeks, who caused Bactrian revolts, grew so powerful on account of the fidelity of the country that they became masters of India, as Apollodorus of Artemita says, and more tribes were subdued by them than by Alexander, by Menander in particular, at least if he actually crossed the Hypasus or Beas River towards the east and advanced as far as the Imaus or Himalayas, and they took possession not only of Patalena or Sindh, but also the rest of the coast, of what is called the Kingdom of Sarostas or Sarashtra today in Gujarat, and Sigurdis, or the Indus River Delta. And it was at the same time, when the Indo-Greeks were conquering India, that in Central Asia they reached the western frontiers of China. And the Chinese began writing about the land of the Yuan-Du, which was a derivative of Hindus, to refer to India in the 1st century BC. And this would later develop into Tiandu, and ultimately Tianzhu, and was later described in the 4th century AD by Chinese sources as low, damp, and very hot. It borders a large river. The inhabitants ride on elephants in warfare. They are weaker than the Yuezhi, or the later Kushans. They practice the way of Futu, the Buddha, and therefore it has become a custom among them not to kill or attack others. The land produces elephants, rhinoceroses, tortoise shells, gold, silver, copper, iron, lead, and tin. It communicates to the west with Darkin, the Roman Empire, and so has the exotica of Darkin. So this is how the Chinese conceived India as they began to trade directly with the Indo-Greeks in Central Asia and would have encountered Indian bodies. And to go back to the Indo-Greeks and the limits of their conquest in India, so as I said, the Mathura would form the furthest limits of Indo-Greek expansion into India, and an inscription at the Hathigumpa in Odisha commemorates Alunga's defeat of the Indo-Greeks. Then in the 8th year, Kharavela, with a large army, having sacked Goradagiri, caused pressure on Rajagaha, or Rajgir in Bihar, near Nalanda. On account of the loud report of his act of valor, the Yavana, or Greek king, Dimita, retreated to Mathura, having extricated his demoralized army. Thus, Mathura would remain the limits of Greek rule of India, as attested by the Yavana Ragya Greek rule inscription discovered in Mathura, which attests to Indo-Greek rule lasting until 60 BC. It was in Mathura where an art style known as Mathura art developed under the Indo-Greeks, and there was an art synthesis between Indian and Greek sculpture. And you can see here's an example of a possible Indo-Greek soldier from the 1st century BC, which is today at the Mathura Museum. And Indo-Greek rule would last until the demise of the hands of the Indo-Scythians around 10 AD, and which would in turn be supplanted by the Indo-Parthians. The Indo-Parthian king Gondophares is mentioned in Christian texts, the Acts of Thomas. It chanced that there was a certain merchant who came from India, whose name was Abanis, sent from King Gondophares. His coins bore his name in Greek as Hydnopheres, and having commandment from him to buy a carpenter and bring him unto him. So this is the Christian conception of India from the Acts of Thomas. So from roughly 2,000 years ago. So it's interesting to see. So we've seen the Hebrew, Jewish tradition, now we're seeing the Christian tradition recording India and interaction with India. So it was known to both Jewish and Christian scholars. And here's a coin of King Gondophares from the 1st century BC. This is silver drachma. And the Indo-Parthian would be supplanted by the Yuzhi, as described by the Chinese, or the Kushan Empire, as they're better known. But despite this, the legacy of the Indo-Greeks would be preserved by the Roman Empire, who, after the conquest of Egypt in 30 BC, took control of the overseas Greek trade with India. Thus, even after the demise of the Indo-Greek kingdom, the Greco-Roman world would continue to trade and interact with India. Strabo provides a record of Roman trade with India from the early 1st century BC. At any rate, when Gallus was prefect of Egypt, I accompanied him, and I learned that as many as 120 vessels were sailing from Myos Homos to India, whereas formerly under the Ptolemies only a very few ventured to undertake the voyage and to carry on traffic in Indian merchandise. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea records how the Greek sea captain Hippolos brought news in the monsoon winds to the Romans. He discovered that leaving from Aden, Yemen on the summer monsoon could safely bring ships to India, while the winter winds would safely bring ships back to Aden. The Indian tribute soon followed to the court of the Roman Emperor, the first Roman Emperor, Augustus, as recorded by Cassius Dio, centuries later. Many embassies came to him. Augustus and the Indians, having previously proclaimed a treaty alliance, concluded it now with the presentation, among other gifts, of tigers, animals, which the Romans, and if I mistake not, the Greeks as well, saw for the first time. The volume of this trade soon grew considerably, as recorded by Pliny. For example, just one documented consignment from Maziris, which was thought to be located in the Chera kingdom in modern-day South India, to Alexandria, consisted of 7 to 1,700 pounds of nard and aromatic balsam, over 4,700 pounds of ivory, and almost 790 pounds of textiles. This has been calculated as worth a total value of 131 talents, enough to purchase 2,400 acres of the best farmland in Egypt. With such staggering profits, it's little wonder that the Roman government in Egypt encouraged the trade, and a 25% tax on all goods coming from India was levied by the Romans at the Red Sea port of Luki-Kome. The most famous relic from this period is that of the Pompeii Lakshmi. This was found in Pompeii in 1938 during the excavation of the city, which was destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. It is now believed to represent a Yakshi and is an excellent example of the breadth of Roman connections with India. And here's a depiction of the Yakshi, which can be seen in Naples, and it was found in Pompeii. But it is this just one example. these connections. In Roman Egypt, the evidence is emerging of very much extensive contact with India. Excavation in Berenike, Egypt, have revealed a marble statue of the Buddha in Gandharan and Greco-Roman style. A Kushan Brahmi inscription has also been discovered. Both date between the 1st and 2nd century AD. So here's a recently excavated marble Buddha. So very much in the Gandharan style, but also the style of marble is very reminiscent of kind of Greco-Roman statuary. So it's very interesting to see. And here's a Kushan Brahmi inscription found in Berenike in Roman Egypt, again between the 1st and 2nd century AD. So it shows kind of interest with India happening in Roman Egypt at the time, 2,000 years ago. And during this period, the Chola kingdom was one of the main trading partners with the Roman Empire, and one of its major ports was in Arikamedu in Tamil Nadu. And archaeologists have discovered evidence of Roman amphorae jars and pottery fragments. Further archaeological evidence, such as coins and Roman pottery, also points to Pattanam, Kerala, being a major port for Indian trade with the Roman Empire. And here's a picture of this pottery from the Museum in Paris. And these are shards from Arezzo in what was then known as Arretium in Lazio in Italy. And this was found in Virampatnam in Arakamedu in Tamil Nadu. And also coins have been found, such as this gold aureus of Claudius, which is minted between 50 and 51 AD, found in Pudukkottai in Tamil Nadu, with these marks, perhaps test marks, to test the purity of the gold. And Indian embassies would continue to be sent to Roman Empire into the 2nd century AD, as recorded by Cassius Dio, or Dio Cassius, in 105 AD. Ever so many embassies came to him, the Emperor Trajan, who was ruling at the time in 105 AD, from various barbarians, including the Sindhi, or the people of the Indus Valley. This visit occurred during the reign of the Roman Emperor Trajan, as I mentioned, who waged war with the Parthian Empire and reached the shores of the Persian Gulf in 115 to 116 AD. And Trajan wished to emulate Alexander the Great and reach India, but he couldn't on account of his age. But he saw ships leaving from what is now kind of southern Iraq, and saw these ships going to India, and was a dreamed of emulating Alexander the Great. And this is the height, the Roman Empire at its height. So you can see it stretching from what is now northern England, all the way down to what is now kind of Iraq and Kuwait, and the western fringes of Iran, in Khuzestan, which had been conquered by Alexander the Great, through the Straits of Gibraltar, the Pillars of Hercules was known, down to even northwest Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And so a vast territory at this time. And during the same period, the Kushan Empire also ruled in the north of India, and here too there's evidence of Roman gold coins flowing eastward to pay for Indian goods. And it's been suggested that this was the inspiration for the Kushan gold dinar, which was approximately 7.9 grams, much like the Roman gold aureus. And a Roman gold coin of Trajan was found in the ruins of a Buddhist stupa at Ahimposh near Jalalabad in Afghanistan. And the Kushans also imitated Roman iconography on their gold coinage, most notably in the form of Roma. And this is the gold coin that was found in Afghanistan, in Ahimposh near Jalalabad. And this is Trajan. So it says Imperator Caesar, or Emperor Caesar, Nerva, Emperor Caesar, Nerva Trajanus, Optimal Augustus, Germany, Dacia. So this is kind of showing his conquests. And this is a depiction of the personification of Rome as a deity. And this is on the Kushan dinar. It says Rome. But however, though, after this period of prosperity, in 3rd century AD, there were profound political changes in India and the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire went through the 3rd century crisis, which saw significant political turmoil, which disrupted trade with India. The Roman Empire actually fragmented into several parts. And the collapse of the Parthian Empire saw the rise of the Sasanian Empire, which conquered the Indus Valley from the Kushan Empire, and the remains of it, I should say, and it threatened the Roman Empire. And once again, Iran reasserted its control of the Indus Valley, as it had done during the Achaemenids. And India was known as Hindustan, or Hindistan, which now is the first time we see this term in history, by the Sasanian Empire, the Persians, and was used to refer to its Indian territories. And this name is first tested in Shapur I's trilingual Middle Persian, Parthian, and Greek inscription at the Kaba-e-Zardosh, which means the cube of Zoroaster in Fars Iran. And it says, I, the Mazda-worshipping Lord Shapur, King of Kings of Iran and non-Iran, or An-Iran as known, whose lineage is from the gods, son of the Mazda-worshipping divinity Ardashir, King of Kings of Iran, whose lineage is from the gods, grandson of Babak, and ruler of Iran Shah and hold these lands, Persis, Parthia, Khuzestan, Messene, Assyria, Adibayan, Arabia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Segan, Aran, Balakan, up to the Caucasus Mountains, and all of the mountain chain of Pareshwa, Media, Gorgan, Merv, Herat, Upper Sharak, Haman, Seistan, Turan, Makaran, Paradan, Hindustan, the Kushan Shah up to Peshawar, Kashgar, Sogdiana, Tashkent, and Oman, so a vast territory. And this is a map showing the territory I just talked about. So for the border regions of kind of what is now eastern, the bordering kind of Turkey, the Caucasus Mountains, right down to the Mesopotamia, the Persian Gulf, all along the Persian Gulf, so including Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates today, and Oman, and parts of what is now Saudi Arabia, and the entirety of Iran, including and also the entirety of Afghanistan and up into Central Asia, and of course India, known here as Hindustan or Hindustan. And this is Peshawar here on the frontier. And Kushan Shah, the former Kushan capital, was here. And here's the Parthian inscription of Shapur I, which I just described, which is today at Nakhchi Rustam in Fars province in Iran, in southern Iran. And here's the actual cube, the monument here, which is also in Iran. And despite the rise of the Sasanian Empire and subsequent wars with Roman Empire, trade did continue between Roman Empire and India, which is stabilized, particularly after the Emperor Aurelian had reunited the three parts of the Roman Empire after civil war in the 3rd century AD, and particularly under the Emperor Diocletian, who restored stability to the Roman Empire. And after Diocletian went into retirement, there was another civil war, and out of the civil war, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great came to power after being proclaimed emperor in York and defeating the Emperor Maxentius at the Battle of Milvian Bridge. And it was Constantine the Great, who is famously known in history as legalizing Christianity, who had an embassy and from India, and this is recorded by Eusebius of Caesarea, who wrote, ambassadors from the Indians of the East brought presents, which they presented to the king, Constantine the Great, as an acknowledgement that his sovereignty extended to the ocean. They told him, too, how princes of India had dedicated pictures and statues in his honor in token that they had recognized him as their autocrat and king. So this is kind of an Indian embassy paying homage to Constantine the Great, and showed how much respect there was for the Roman Empire. In India, the Kushan Empire was ultimately supplanted by the Gupta Empire, who rose to power in the 4th century AD, and Chandragupta II conquered western India and re-established direct links with the Roman Empire, and trade flowed out of ports in Bharuch and Sindh. Unfortunately, this trade would decline with the Hunnic invasions of Europe and India, respectively, which destabilized both the Gupta and Roman empires. Despite these upheavals, the gold Roman solidus of Theodosius II has been found in the Ajanta caves in Maharashtra from the 5th century AD. And this is the actual coin that was pierced to wear as jewelry, but it still shows kind of connection between India and Roman Empire from this period. And this kind of says, Dominus Noster Theodosius per Augustus, Perpetuus Augustus, which means our Lord Theodosius, Perpetual Emperor. And then there's another reverse, which shows Constantinople mint here. And the Gupta Empire would collapse in the early 6th century AD. But with the arrival of the Roman Empire, or some people call it the Byzantine Empire, but it's still known as Roman Empire at that time, under Justinian I and his reconquest of Italy and Northwest Africa, there was renewed prosperity in the Mediterranean. And this led to resumed contact with India, and an Indian ambassador was received at the imperial court in Constantinople. And this is evident with the discovery of a Roman solidus minted by Justinian I in Constantinople, which is found in South India. And this is the coin of Justinian I that was found in South India. So it shows kind of the renewal of trade with the Romans under Justinian. But this would come to an end with the plague of Justinian, which crippled the Roman Empire, and subsequent wars with the Sasanian Empire, as well as continued political instability in India. The final war between the Roman Empire under Heraclius and the Sasanian Empire under Khusro II would severely weaken both empires and help lead to the rise of a new power in the Arabian Peninsula, the Muslim Arabs. And the Muslim Arabs would conquer much of the Roman Empire in the Eastern Mediterranean and destroy the Sasanian Empire. And this is the Sasanian Empire at its peak, not long before its conquest and subjugation. And at its peak, it reached right up to regions kind of facing just at Kadikoy or Chalcigodon, as known, facing Constantinople, and right down south into Egypt, and down into Yemen, and Oman, and Jordan, and right up to India. You can see Hindustan here. So it's very interesting that, and Kashmir here. It's interesting that the entire, which is also part of India, it's just interesting that such a broad region of control, very much quite close to what the empire of the Achaemenids centuries before. And after the Arab conquest of Iran, the Arabs adopted Al-Hind from Hindustan to refer to India, and the Arabs had contact with India since antiquity. They travelled in their dhows to trade in pepper, precious stones, iron, horses, and slaves. And in return, the Indians received valuable gold and silver bullion, which could be struck as coinage. The Arabs imported Indian swords, which were famed for their quality and highly prized. It's likely that some of these weapons were used in the Arab conquests. The first Muslim traders followed the same trading route as their pre-Islamic ancestors. Teakwood forests in the Rashtrakuta kingdom were used to build ships in Iraq. This was known as the Balahara to Muslims. Al-Masudi wrote that 10,000 Muslims settled in the district of Seymour in the Balahara kingdom, who were known as the Bayase, or Muslims born in Al-Hind, the first Muslims born in India. Trade also grew on the Malabar coast of Kerala, where the Indian Jewish community also grew in prominence at the same time to facilitate Arab trade in the region. The Arabs took local wives and settled in Malabar, thus founding the Mappila community of Kerala. Many of these Arabs traced their lineage to the Hadramaut region of Yemen and were renowned sailors who were allowed to build mosques and cemeteries by the local Indian rulers. They also adopted the local Malayalam language and the dress code of the Hindu Nayars, and the Mappilas retain these traditions to these days. In Tamil Nadu, the Ilpai or the Arabi the Arabs settled and were fishermen who traded gems and pearls with Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. They also became known as Labai, and with this wealth, they also built mosques and had the patronage of local Tamil Hindu kings who protected them. However, military campaigns by the Muslim Arabs started as early as 637 AD, when the Caliph Umar, the second Caliph, attempted to capture Thana near Mumbai, but was repulsed by the Chalukya dynasty. The following decades saw the Arab conquest of the Sasanian Empire, and the frontiers of the Muslim Caliphate now reached Balochistan on the western frontiers of India after defeating Raja Rasil, a local Hindu king. However, just as Azan the Great had discovered 900 years before, the Balochistan coast was inhospitable, and Umar's successor, the third Caliph, Uthman, decided to demarcate the west bank of the Indus River as the eastern frontier of the Muslim Caliphate. And here is a map showing the invasions that would take place by the Arabs of Al-Hind, or that's how they conceived of India at the time, which was divided at the time between the Kingdom of Sindh, the Kingdom of and other kingdoms in the region. And it wasn't until the Umayyad conquest of Sindh that the Muslim Arabs established a foothold in India, and this was initially in response to a pirate raid on a ship carrying Arab Muslim widows and their children who were sailing back to India after the death of their husbands. They were all captured by pirates based in Sindh. Raja Dahi of Sindh didn't comply with demands to hand over the prisoners, and this was used as a pretext for the Umayyads to invade Sindh. Muhammad bin Qasim was sent with an army comprising 6,000 cavalry and 6,000 camels, as well as 5 catapults. Muhammad bin Qasim was successful in conquering Debal and securing a foothold in Sindh. He marched inland to defeat Raja Dahir, who took refuge at Alor. He then conquered Alor and Brahmanabad in Sindh, and then Multan in Punjab. Tension between the Hindus and Buddhists aided these conquests, as Raja Dahir's father Chash had overthrown the Buddhist Rai dynasty. The Hindus were mostly farmers, while the Buddhists controlled much of the trade in Sindh. In time, the Buddhists saw commercial advantages in converting to Islam and disappeared from Sindh, while Hinduism remained intact. Trade grew as Sindh became a commercial centre linked with Multan, Iran and Kashmir, as well as Central Asia and China. Much of the trade comprised sugarcane, bamboo, salt and camels. Brahmins continued as revenue officers rural Sindh, while the famous Hindu Sun Temple in Multan was maintained as a pilgrimage site for Hindu pilgrims. The revenue from the temple enriched Multan. So it's interesting that you had Muslim rulers who preserved a Hindu temple in a Sun Temple in Multan, and saw the economic benefits of continuing to protect it. So it's interesting that fact. But Umayyad attempts to expand further into Gujarat, however, were halted, and there wouldn't be further attempts at expansion of the Arabs into India until the rise of the Abbasids in 750 AD. And the Hindus called the Arab invaders Turushkas, or Turuk in Turkic, and Tajikas, which is derived from Tazik in Middle Persian, due to the kind of heterogeneous composition of the Umayyad armies, which comprised also Turks and also Persians. The Abbasids took power in 750 AD, and the control of the Sindh became precarious over time as local Arab chiefs began to exercise greater autonomy. By the 9th century AD, the Abbasids had lost effective control of Sindh, and thus Arab rule effectively ended as well. After the decline of the Abbasids, the Persian Tahirids, Saffarids, and Samanids supplanted Arab rule in the former eastern provinces of the Abbasids. It was after the Ghaznavid overthrow of the Samanids that direct Muslim rule was established in India. The Ghaznavids invaded India and established their centre of power in Lahore and Punjab, while raiding Rajasthan and Gujarat. However, one of the first foreign studies of India was published during the Ghaznavid era. Abu Rayyan Muhammad ibn Ahmad al-Baruni, or better known as al-Baruni, was an Iranian from Khorasan in Central Asia who settled in the Ghaznavid court. He wrote his book Kitab-i-Tahqiq Ma'al-Hind, which delved into Indian history, sociology, anthropology and geography, while condemning Ghaznavid depredation on Hindus and their sacred sites. Al-Biruni was appreciative of Indian learning and praised the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Al-Biruni also wrote about Indian society and described the caste system to his readers. He wrote how the highest caste were the Brahmins, the second were the Kshatriyas, the third caste were the Vaisya, and the fourth caste were the Sudra, and the other castes include those who render service such as the shoe makers and weavers, the Julahas, and the lowest castes were called Hadi, Doma, Kandala, and Madatan, who were preoccupied with cleaning villages and were treated as social outcasts. So it's interesting that we have an outside perspective on the caste system when writing about India, as from an Arab point of view at this time. And there's actually useful evidence for the caste system from this period. And the Ghaznavids would in turn be overthrown by the Ghurids, who came from Ghur in Afghanistan. They soon conquered the Ghaznavid Empire, including its Indian territories. Interestingly, Indian sources such as Jayanaka contrast the use of the Persian language, which the Ghurids used, with that of Sanskrit. And here's actually a short sentence that kind of describes that. Damn his dark speech, which lacked retroflect sound and so squawked like the cry of wild birds. So very condescending. While contemporary Persian sources otherwise have a completely different approach. They say that the invaders put subtle ideas into elegant language, and which strung the peaks of counsel and admonition onto the thread of fine expression. So two very different responses to each other. And it was during the Ghaznavid and Ghurid dynasty that Sufis began migrating to India, and this led to the mixing of Persian and Indian culture. And this would culminate in the mixture of Prakrit with Persian and Arabic and Delhi Sultanate, which would ultimately give birth to Hindavi, which would lead to the development of Urdu much later in the Mughal period. The Delhi Sultanate supplanted the Ghurids and established a rule in Delhi. And it was during this era of that we have the famous poet Amir Khusro Delvi, who lived a bit later, or quite a bit later, that we start hearing about the Hindavi dialect, which emerged, which comprised Sanskrit, Arabic, and Persian vocabulary, and would have a profound influence on the development of later Hindi and Urdu languages. And in the Persian language, Hind emerged as the main name for India, or Hind today, in modern Persian, and from this Hindi would develop, which comes from Hindi in modern Persian, which means Indian. So like in Persian, I would say man Hindi hastam, which means I am Indian. And obviously Hindi would give its name to the language in later centuries. And Amir Khusro praised India as the greatest land on earth. He wrote in one of his poems, "For if the Creator bestows upon me the gift, so that my easy flowing pen may be empowered to express qualities to perfection, I aspire not to leave the greatness of this land on earth, but raise it to the sky up to the height of heaven. Kuldi Barin. And Amikuso also praised India as the earth's paradise, Firdos, Ad-Firdos, and its climate as well as Sanskrit as the quality of a pearl among pearls. He also praised Brahmins. Brahmins, in their knowledge and intellect, are far superior to the knowledge of all books of Aristotle. Whatever the Greeks reveal in philosophical thought to the world, the Brahmins have a greater wealth of it. And as the audience know, the Delhi Sultanate was conquered by the Mughals in 1526 when Babur defeated Sultan Ibrahim at Lodi at Battle of Panipat. It was under Babur that Hindustan would come into wider usage in his writings, the Baburnama, and this came to mean the entirety of India. And he wrote in the Baburnama, Hindustan is situated in the first and second and third climates. No part of it is in the fourth. He wrote, once you cross the river Indus, the country, the trees, the stones, the people and their customs are all Indian. It was this term Hindustan which had been encountered by the British when they invaded India and established their rule. And it was during British rule, spoken language of India was known as Hindustani to the British. And Indians first came under company rule by the mid-19th century before being directly ruled after the 1857 war. And it was during company rule that Sir William Jones found the Asiatic Society of Bengal and encouraged the study of India. He translated Sanskrit works such as that of Panini, the Vedas and the Puranas into English, thus giving birth to modern Western studies of India and helped conceptualize the notion of India as we know it today, which was very much in the mind of the first generation of Indian leaders when they were drafting the Constitution of India. And it was these debates and studies that would later inform the first generation of Indians as they created the Constitution and Republic of India, and which was enacted on the 26th of January 1950. On that note, I have finished my lecture. Thank you. Yeah. It's finished. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, your Professor Pandey?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, now I can.
Really, it was very interesting lecture, and
Yes.
it covered almost every aspect of the emergence of the understanding of India from very
Yes.
ancient period to modern period. And
Yes.
really, it is very interesting to see how Indians visualized India, and really, it is very sometimes enigmatic to understand how such a subcontinental people came to adhere to an imagination of India, which is something which is a common adherence. Like when we observe West Asia, we find people are divided into different nationalities, and originally they were belonging to the Turkish Empire, but with the emergence of nationalism, there were different territories parceled out as nationalities, and this is another topic of how different nationalities came into existence and how they were competing with each other, and how Iran is competing with some other Muslim countries in Middle East, and how the things emerged after the emergence of Israel. But as far as India is concerned, we find that this Indian subcontinent continued to remain India, and it could accommodate the different, if I am allowed to say, peoples of India. How different peoples of India, they were accommodated as accommodated in the broad rubric of India. And despite all the identities, plethora of identities of language, religion, region, etc., Indian subcontinent could come up with a conglomerate which one can safely describe India is constituted of Indian people. So how Indian people came into existence from the origin of different peoples residing at different parts of India, really it is something like a tribute to political economy and political science of the period, that the different people residing at different parts of India, having different language, some sort of different culture, they came to describe themselves as India. So it was really a very interesting lecture to understand how India was visualized, and ultimately how, as you started from Article 1 of the Indian Constitution and you quoted perhaps Article 3 of the Indian Constitution of India, that is, Bharat shall be constituted of the following states and union territories. You very well described about Bharat and India, and how India was designated as Bharat in the Indian Constitution. India, that is Bharat. I have given thought about it. India, that is Pakistan, can also be understood because Pakistan was part of British India, and the part of British India was the Myanmar also, which Myanmar got separated as a separate state, and Pakistan and Bangladesh, they came into existence after 1947, but they were part of Indian identity as such. So it was really a very interesting talk, and I thank you and congratulate you for giving such an exhaustive talk in such a capsule manner. Thank you, sir, very much. Thanks. And the whole audience is thanked for attending the lecture. And if someone has to ask any question, the house is open for question, debate. Anyone can ask, anyone can air one's observation. So please come up with the observations.
Thank you.
Mr. S.K. Tripathi Sahab is here in the lecture. I think he would like to ask something, or he may come up with his observation.
Okay. Just going to add one more thing, is that when he talked about I talked about constitution, like I just remembered about the discovery of India, and how I think that was also quite important. Nehru's book, The Discovery of India, was very important as well in kind of forming those ideas, like, because he kind of put it down I think he wrote it when he was in you can correct me, I think he was in jail at the time, and he wrote this book. He had time to write this book, and he kind of put down his ideas of what India should be, and he kind of talks about the past, but interestingly, he points out, which is something I was hinting at the beginning of the talk, the commonality between the people of Iran and India, and how Iranians had a very similar conception of themselves. So I think the closest parallel is actually Iran, also because they both call themselves Aryans as well. The Iranians call themselves Aryans. I mean, the name Iran implies that, and obviously the Indian, the ancient Indians always call themselves Aryans. So I think the closest contemporary is actually Iran, which also comprises different groups, and again has a very ancient identity, going back also to kind of the similar kind of period. So I think that's the kind of closest contemporary, just to the west of what is now, obviously, what is India.
Yes, you are very right. In 1936, Rabindranath Tagore was invited by Iran, and the Iranian people claimed that our person, our Aryan, has been given Nobel Prize. So how Iranian people identified with India in the name Arya as such. So really the whole from Middle East or from West Asia to whole Asia, if I should say, there was something like a meaning which was beneath the meanings which were there at the surface. and the beneath the meaning has been the meaning of India. If you visit the Southeast Asia, sir, you will find, as you had already earlier lectured, how Southeast Asia witnessed something like ideas of India there, how ideas of India percolated in Southeast Asia and Asia as such in the form of Buddhism, and even prior to that in the form of the ideas of Brahmanism. And later how Brahmanism, Buddhism and the followers of Islam, how they amalgamated to form something like a composite culture. We described the composite culture in India, how different cultures were there, but how they started living together, having respect for each other. So you are very right that from ancient we have the I should say precedence that the people of this whole region were one because of regional variations, because of religion, because of outlook to polity and society and commerce. They arrange themselves in different forms like nationalities, but in the ultimate analysis they were one. There are certain genetic studies of Indian subcontinent by the genetic scientists, and they came to declare that Indian people as such genetically having something, a commonality of their gene pool. They say that, and particularly they say that the Brahmins, they are the very ancient people of this area, and the Brahminic gene is percolated among the Indian people, Indian different castes. This is not very important, but the important thing is that how people came to accommodate with this, to come up with a conglomerate of politics which is to unite them instead of divide them and to make them strife-ridden. So this is the beauty of the Indian subcontinent, that despite all the disparities, despite all the divisions, and despite all the identities, they came up with a common identity and common goal of future. Common goal of future, that how Indian subcontinent will have a democratic country, a socialist country, a secular country, and having unity and integrity with a dignity, guaranteeing dignity to the individuals, with freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and all the good things which came into India, which came to world as a gift of modern world from French Revolution onwards. So thank you very much for giving your ideas. I welcome you, and I look forward to again hear from you your ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with these words, I take permission to end the talk of today. Thank you very much.